Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Cade, joined by Andrew, and this is going to be our first film versus film episode. And for today, we have Black Christmas from 1974 versus Black Christmas, the remake from 2006. Andrew, now having finally seen both versions of Black Christmas, what were your overall thoughts on both movies?
Overall, I liked the original from 1974. It's a very classic slasher. It's not overly complicated. There's no supernatural elements. Overall, it's a very solid movie.
And actually, fun fact about it, it was released the same day as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's very interesting. Was it released around Christmas time?
No,
Okay, so following the Die Hard route, I appreciate it. But yeah, overall, when it comes to the original, I think it's a very solid horror movie. I don't think it would crack, like, say, the top 10 of all time, but it's an important movie and it's a solid movie. The remake is a very mid 2000s horror movie remake.
yeah, and we'll talk more about our issues with that. But to start this off, first thing I wanted to talk about with both versions is definitely the plots. And, obviously, the basic premise of Black Christmas follows a group of sorority sisters who are stalked by a mysterious killer hiding in the house that they're all staying at up in the attic. And he starts picking them off one by one, and he's kind of just tormenting them with the phone calls. It's a simple but effective premise for a horror film, talking about the original specifically. And that's kind of all that I really need when it comes to a slasher film. Simple but effective.
Yeah, whereas the remake plot is effectively the same thing, but as we'll get into in a little bit when we get into characters, adds detail that didn't really need to exist. And even though it had essentially the same plot beyond that, it weirdly feels less interesting. I don't know, maybe it's because of the oversaturation of color almost, or the less than stellar acting performances. But overall, I don't know, just the plot felt more dated to me in the remake than in the original.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. And talking about the approach that it takes to having this killer who's after all these different sorority sisters. So, when it comes to the original, one of my favorite things about the original, and one of the most effective things in my opinion, is the fact that the killer is just a complete mystery to us. Apart from finding out, his name, Billy, and apparently there's some debate on whether his name is Billy at all, which is kind of interesting. And we get little glimpses of him throughout the movie when he's kind of in the shadows, but never a clear picture. Other than that, we don't know anything about him. We don't really know what he looks like. We don't know his backstory. We don't know why he's there, why he's after these people specifically. And to me, that makes him a more effective killer. The fact that we don't know anything. That's one of the reasons why I love the original Halloween, or why I love The Strangers, because those killers are just mysteries to us. And that made them not only scarier, but more complex as characters too.
It really does, because you don't know a damn thing about Billy's motivation in the first one. Is he a psychiatric patient? Does he have multiple personality disorder? Is he an escaped convict? Is he a serial killer that was never caught?
Is he one of the students on campus for all we know?
Is he one of the students on campus? That's a very real possibility, because the snippets we do get, I mean, he looks vaguely college age. He could very well be one of their classmates. And again, we don't know a damn thing about him. As a result of not knowing a damn thing about him, there's that natural sense of fear that comes with the natural sense of mystery.
Exactly. And that to me is, I think, one of the main reasons why the original is scary enough. But then you get to the remake, and while the basic premise still stays the same as the original, it does the complete opposite with the killer, because in this one, we learn everything that we can about this character.
Oh, yes, we do. And my God, this is one of those scenes. I've used the phrase, I've never wanted to be in a writer's room more, and I have used it for this movie, and I have used it for that scene in Transformers Age of Extinction. I think you know the one I'm talking about.
Yes, but okay, so they throw away the whole aspect of making Billy a mystery to us. They give him a clear backstory. We find out he was abused by his mother, that she kept him locked up in the attic of their house, which, eventually becomes the house for the sorority sisters. His mom remarries and can't conceive a kid with him, so she forces herself onto her son and has an incestuous child named Agnes, who eventually becomes a killer with him. Then Billy ends up killing his mom and his stepdad. They give us every detail that honestly we just weren't looking for. And by giving him all of this backstory, you're making him less of a mystery. And because of that, you make him less scary of a killer.
Yeah, not only, and in my opinion, this was added just for shock value, and I hate when things are added just for shock value. To kind of tie in one of our most recent videos, I hated that they added that element to Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. This movie gives me a very similar feeling. It's shock for the sake of shock and gross for the sake of gross. Gross does not equal scary, unlike how mystery does amplify fear. Gross doesn't really amplify fear, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, because here's the thing about the original Black Christmas. Were the kills violent? Sure, but it wasn't a full-on gore fest. With this movie, you just go the complete opposite. It's just full-on gore for the sake of gore.
Yeah, just again, what the hell were the writers thinking when somebody pitched that?
Well, and here's the other thing. One of the biggest things that we learn from his backstory, we learn that the house that all the sorority sisters are staying in, we find out, one of the biggest changes is that the house used to be his. Okay.
Again, that's another aspect of the mystery from the original, which is why does Billy choose this sorority house? Is it just because their window was open? It was easy to get into? I mean, that's a very real possibility, but we don't know. Again, it adds to the mystery and it adds to the creepiness. This one, it's like, oh, we'll be home for Christmas. Ugh. It's very eye rolling.
Yeah, but apart from that, let's talk about some of the characters. You have the characters from the original Black Christmas. You have characters like Jess, the final girl, played by Olivia Hussey. There's also her boyfriend, Peter, who's hinted at possibly being the killer, although we find out at the end that he's really not. You got Barb, the snarky, loudmouth sorority sister, played by Margot Kidder. There's Mrs. Mack, the drinker, who also has this sort of, motherly relationship with the other sisters. And you even got the cop character, Lieutenant Fuller, played by the great John Saxon. And while the characters in the original aren't some of my favorite characters in slasher movies or horror films in general, I don't think that there's anyone who's particularly annoying or unlikable in this movie. They feel a lot more like genuine characters, which is something I appreciate. And it wasn't one of those movies where I was just hoping that everyone would die the entire time.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is like a cast of classic horror movie characters on the level of, say, Nancy Thompson or Sidney Prescott, Laurie Strode, Tommy Jarvis, Ash from Evil Dead. But you put it a good way. You're not just sitting there waiting for them to die. And when they do die, you do feel bad for them. Because it is just a group of, kind of snarky, but overall pretty decent sorority girls. It's not like they're, terrible people. So you do feel bad for them when they do bite the dust.
Yeah, and like you said, when it comes to Jess, the final girl, I mean, she might not be one of the best final girls, just in my opinion, like Sidney Prescott or Nancy Thompson. But the thing about her, I think that Olivia Hussey brings a certain likability to the character. So she's someone who you can root for in the end. But then you also have a character like Barb, who probably should be the most annoying character in the movie. But I think that Margot Kidder brings a lot of sassy charm to her. So that's one of the things that makes her more likable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you can be sassy without being annoying. And I don't think she ever crosses that line into straight out and out annoying. So then as a result, when she does end up getting stabbed with the glass unicorn, which is way more better of shot of a scene than it has any right to be, in my opinion, but we'll get into cinematography a little later. Again, you do feel bad when characters die in this movie. You're not sitting around like, oh my God, you're so annoying. I can't wait for the killer to get you.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, the characters in the remake are kind of just the opposite, which is too bad because when it comes to the sorority girls, I would say that the cast actually isn't bad. I mean, you got Katie Cassidy, Michelle Trachtenberg, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Lacey Chabert, Crystal Lowe. And the thing is, all the characters that they're playing are pretty much the most basic one-note caricatures in slasher films because there's the final girl, Kelly, played by Katie Cassidy, who doesn't really get any good characterization. There's Heather, the rich kid, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. You got Lauren, the drinker, played by Crystal Lowe. You even got your nerd character, Eve, played by Kathleen Cole. There's also Michelle Trachtenberg's character, Melissa. I really can't tell you anything about this character other than she's nice.
Yeah, this movie has the problem of I can't wait for you to get killed. Because, I mean, I've seen far worse horror movie characters, but they really don't add much to this plot. Like, to the point where I couldn't even keep any of their names straight when Cade and I were watching this together.
Yeah, because, I mean, look at Lacey Chabert's character and this movie's version of Mrs. Mack. I mean, they're kind of just nothing characters. They're literally just two more people to be here for the killer to then pick off.
In one of the dumbest kills I've ever seen in a horror movie. So can we talk about the kills?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the original Black Christmas is not the goriest of slasher movies. I wouldn't say it has the best kills in slasher history. I don't think Billy lives up to, say, Jason or Freddy or Michael, but there is still some very solid kills in this movie. The pulley hook into Mrs. Mack's face, even though it's mostly off screen, is still pretty good.
It's probably the most creative kill in the movie, just in my opinion.
Yeah, and then you've also got Barb being stabbed to death with the glass unicorn. That one is really good because not only is the cinematography really good, but I also like how it's in time with the music of the carolers singing. It adds this very creepy feel to it. Some very solid kills in this movie. And credit where credit is due, there is also some solid kills in the remake. In particular, I am a big fan of Billy and Agnes's kills at the end of the movie.
And it's just too bad that the best kills are saved for the ending, that we didn't see them throughout the whole movie.
Yes, because at least with other bad horror movie remakes of this time period, there was at least a few good kills in a lot of them, and at least this one can at least deliver that. However, it also gives maybe one of the dumbest kills I've ever seen in horror movies, which is the kill of Mrs. Mack and Heather in the car. So you're telling me that Billy was just sitting into the back of this car waiting for one of them to come out? What if they decided to just, fortify themselves in the house? Was he just going to wait there till he starved to death?
Yeah, and also talking about Miss Mack's death, I've always found this to be a very baffling death in the movie because for a couple seconds, the movie basically turns into Final Destination because she sees Heather get killed. She stumbles back, bumps up against the wall, and then the icicle drops and then lands on her head. I just really got Final Destination vibes from that, which I guess isn't too surprising because this movie's produced by James Wong, who directed the first and third Final Destination. So I don't know, maybe this was kind of a wink to the audiences who really enjoyed those movies.
Maybe, but it does feel kind of out of place for this one.
And just the kills in general, I mean, this movie really has a thing for eyeballs.
Oh, God, yeah. And as somebody who can't handle eye stuff, again, for me, it's just gross for the sake of gross.
Yeah, and so many of the characters get kills related to their eyes. There's Dana, Melissa, Kelly's boyfriend Kyle, just a lot of them die with eyeball style kills. But also, talking about one of the other characters in this movie, there's also the character Agnes. Agnes is Billy's incestuous daughter, and she's also the second killer of the movie. So I will say this, when it comes to recreating a slasher story, especially the story of Black Christmas, and having two people instead of just one person as the killer, so if you recreate a slasher story in that way, and this is just my opinion, not like a terrible approach, that could have been really interesting. But the problem is, it honestly seems like Agnes is only included in this movie to have a little nod back to the original. In the phone calls when Billy was always mentioning Agnes, even though we don't know who that was. Agnes kind of just feels like she's in this movie just for the sake of doing something that sort of pays homage to the original.
Yeah, I feel like they're trying to go the Scream route, the twist being two killers.
The thing is, though, in the original Scream, it actually made a lot more sense because having two killers threw the characters and essentially the audience off of who the killer might be. Here's the problem, though. We already know who the killer is.
Yeah, that's a problem, and I feel like they maybe could have done it a little better if they had had one of the immediate cast turn out to be Agnes and not just this other character.
I think you had mentioned when we were watching, I think you thought, hey, is Eve going to be the killer? Is she going to be Billy's sister?
Yeah, I could have seen it being Eve. I think that would have been maybe a little too obvious with how they presented Eve, and wow, what a weird bait and switch that was.
But apart from that, now getting into other things about both movies, the cinematography and the editing. So one of the things that I will praise about both movies is going to be the cinematography, specifically with the original Black Christmas. I think it's shot pretty well, especially when it comes to the kills, but also when we see the killer hiding in the shadows. And I also enjoy the first person perspective that we get from the killer. After the first time I watched this, I could definitely see how this really was a big inspiration for John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah, the Halloween DNA is definitely on the screen. But I mean, if you're going to draw inspiration from something, Black Christmas was not a bad place to start.
And, with the remake of Black Christmas, while I don't think the cinematography is necessarily better, overall, I think it's a competently shot movie. And one thing that I think both movies do well is capturing the colors of Christmas. I think that's something that adds to both the movies overall.
I will give you that for the original. The remake, it definitely has the Christmas feel with the color scheme. I think maybe everything feels a little overly saturated.
Well, don't forget, Andrew, and I think you mentioned this to me when we were watching it. It comes from that era, the 2000s, where a lot of movies all just kind of looked the same.
Yeah, they did. So all the colors in the remake seem, I don't want to say oversaturated again, but overly bright and overly colorful. I don't think I'd ever see somebody's house with these brighter Christmas decorations.
But apart from the cinematography, there's also the editing, and I think the sound design was something you wanted to bring up.
Oh my God. This is one where the remake actually does it better than the original because the sound editing in the original Black Christmas is atrocious. There is multiple scenes where there is either music or sound effects blaring over people trying to have conversations that move the plot along. Now, there's multiple examples of this, but the worst for me, it's like the first third of the movie where Jess and Peter are talking, but Peter's playing the piano, and the piano music is so damn loud, you have a problem hearing Jess and Peter's conversation. It's a very meaningful conversation because it kind of sets up, oh, maybe Peter is the killer towards the end of the movie because it's, Jess revealing to Peter that she's pregnant. But the music is so loud you can barely hear what they're saying. I had to put captions on.
Well, and the other thing is, even when it comes to the phone calls, I mean, the phone calls sound pretty unsettling, but the thing is, a lot of times it's kind of hard to hear what Billy is saying to the sorority sisters at times.
Yeah, that's another example.
And surprisingly enough, I honestly think the remake did the phone calls, with the sound editing. I think the remake did the phone calls a little bit better, to be honest.
Yeah, that's one of the few that the remake has in its favor, is at least it's mixed well.
Yeah.
Okay, this is an issue I have with both the original and the remake. Why the hell does nobody check the goddamn attic? The original could have been 20 minutes long if somebody had just thought to check the fucking attic.
Yeah, and you know what the thing is, if they did check the attic, because even Mrs. Mack does at one point when she tries to find the cat, if they did, it wouldn't necessarily ruin the movie, but it's something that I think more characters would have done in this situation, like Lieutenant Fuller or Jess or Barb or anybody. But again, it wouldn't have ruined the movie in any way. It's just, it would have been a very logical thing to do.
You have people searching this house top to bottom, but nobody thought to check the freaking attic. There's so many characters that come in and out of this house looking for the various, girls who have disappeared in the original. And nobody thinks to go upstairs. You check everywhere when you search for somebody. And the remake has the same sin. I know this is a minor plot hole. I should not be this annoyed by it. But my God, did this grind my gears.
Yeah, again, doesn't ruin the movie. It's just a plot hole that's, I think, worth mentioning. We also need to talk about, just to close this up, I want to talk about the endings. So in the original, after Jess kills her boyfriend Peter, thinking that he's the killer, we find out that the killer is actually still alive, and then he sneaks out of the attic one final time when Jess is left alone in her room. And the movie leaves off on more of an ambiguous ending, and I think it actually works kind of well. And I say that as a guy who generally doesn't like ambiguous endings, but the reason I think it works here is because it stays true to keeping the killer a complete mystery, because we still don't know anything about him by the time the movie's over.
Yeah, not only do we know anything about him, it seems like he gets away with it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, part of what makes the ending even more effective.
Yeah, anytime a slasher killer wins, ups the character for me as a whole.
Yeah, but then you have the ending of the remake. So after Billy and Agnes take out most of the sorority sisters, the house then burns down, and Kelly and Lee escape, and then you end up at the hospital where Billy and Agnes turn out to still be alive. They kill Lee, and then they have one final fight with Kelly, and she eventually finishes them off. Not gonna lie, when the house started to burn down, it really felt like the movie was over at that point. Having the true climax set inside this hospital just felt shoved in here for the sake of being in here, because in my opinion, if Billy and Agnes just died in that house when it was burning down, that would have been a way more satisfying ending, just because of all the trauma that they suffered there, and just because of how the whole movie is pretty much set there. So that, to me, I think would have been a much more satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, for me, that would have been sort of like the ending to the Halloween 2018, which is, in my opinion, that's an ambiguous ending done right. I think that would have hit harder emotionally as opposed to this hospital scene, which does feel a little tacked on. It does give us the two best kills in the movie, so it does have that going for it. But yeah, it just feels like the house burning down is more of a natural climax.
Yeah, but again, like you said, it does give us two of the best kills in the movie, so, it has that going for it. But guys, to close this off, this has been the Black Christmas 1974 original versus the Black Christmas 2006 remake, and Andrew, as we can tell, which movie wins?
I mean, it's got to be the original for me. It just because 2006 is that was a dark period for bad horror movie remakes, and this one certainly is no different.
Yeah, Black Christmas 1974 definitely wins. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you all again next time.